Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and today I'm joined by McKay, the founder and CEO of Tree Brewery. Thanks for joining.
Yes, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And it is Knoxville, right? You guys are based in Knoxville.
We are, yeah. It's my hometown, and that was where we started the brewery back in 2009. And then we have a tap room up in Des Moines as well, but our home base and production is here in Knoxville.
Today we're talking about Iowa beer and why local laws make beer and spirit distribution kind of weird and add a little bit of cost to you. But before we do that, have you subscribed? Make sure to do that. If you're listening, I don't know where you're listening. Somewhere. You're listening somewhere on the internet. Go to iowapodcast.com and all your favorite podcast badges are right there up top. You can click one of them and subscribe. In Apple, it's a bit weird. You have to go to the top right corner of your screen. There's an itsy bitsy little plus sign. Click that and you will be, I think they call it follow. You will follow the show because they have to be different over there at Apple. Alrighty. So you have a story similar to a guest on another show I did a while back, Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks. You can just say later that McKay is the new Howard Schultz. Just, you can put that out there because that's official now in the Iowa Podcast. But he started his company kind of with the same thinking you did, which is he just started it because he wanted to prove that he could do well by his workers, even part-time workers. You kind of have a similar story, which is you basically started the business not because you were a beer snob, but because you wanted to improve your hometown of Knoxville, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's very much it. We, we were in the family insurance business and had bought a building and then bought another building and didn't really know what to do with it. And it became pretty clear pretty quick that nobody really had a lot of foresight to come up with how to turn this thing into something else. And so one day my dad said something about maybe we should start a craft brewery, which seemed like a really ridiculous idea. But then, when you started looking at it, it's like, okay, we need a quality of life place. We need a place we can take clients and friends and family from out of town. We need to drive tourism. We need to create jobs that are interesting and unique that will bring our young people back home. And just, again, kind of have another point of pride for our hometown. And I think, because of that start, we've probably made a lot of mistakes along the way. We've come at it a little differently than if we were just, after profit. But on the other hand, I think we've built a company that we can be really proud of.
Yeah, I love that story because, it's 2008 recession, right? I think that's kind of when the whole thing started. Yeah, we bought the building probably 2007.
Yeah. The brewery idea came to fruition in March of 2019. And then we just hit the ground running. We had our business plan together and financing, had a brewer hired in July. Taproom was open in October. And then we actually celebrate our anniversary as March of 2010 because that's when our full production was up and running.
Sure. So let's break down. I have obviously a ton of questions for you. 2022 marks a big year. I want to talk about Iowa brewing in general, but can we break down the current stats? Like 2022 was a big milestone. You're within a certain category of Iowa brewers now.
Yeah. I guess I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to.
Oh,
You'll have to help me out.
You hit the top 10, right?
We've probably been in the top 10 for quite a long time. And then
see, that's interesting you bring that because I was reading,
I'm trying to think
I think I was reading
that.
Like an article somewhere and it's something about like 2022, you're in the top 10. I'm like, I kind of feel like you've been kind of big for a while, like doing pretty well for a while, but maybe it would be easier to start here. Like, can you give me like a breakdown? Cause here, let me back up a little bit. When I first had Hop Wrangler, I don't think you make that anymore, but I had Hop Wrangler. That was my first experience with Peachtree. And at the time, I just thought you were a national brand. Just, it was professionally labeled, clearly looked like an outside job. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I remember I think this is maybe a little embarrassing for me to admit, but not until you put your East Village location in the East Village did I realize you were an Iowa brand. Shame on me, I guess. But
No.
let's break down the overall thing. Like how much beer do you guys make annually?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I feel a little silly that I wasn't quite sure where your question was going, but it's, I think we were one of the breweries who decided we wanted to kind of grow from the get-go. And so had kind of been in that top, 5 or so with the onslaught of so many other breweries that kind of had different growth patterns. I think we're definitely squarely in that top 10. This past year, frankly, was a slower year for us. We kind of shrunk a little bit. So we did around 3,500 barrels of beer, which probably doesn't mean a whole lot to anybody, but
not to me.
Let me do some quick math on that.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I think
there's nothing like on the fly math.
Cases, yeah. So that's about 48,000 cases of beer.
Oh my gosh.
Which is really small in the beer world.
Really?
You think about, so we're at 3,500 barrels. You look at, craft breweries that are in I don't even know what Boulevard would be. They'd probably be at 200,000 barrels or something like that. But we're all still in that like small craft category.
Sure,
and then you look at really small breweries, who are just doing taproom only. They might only be producing like 400 barrels a year.
Right.
So it's a really wide spectrum from top to bottom. And I think that's part of what makes it very challenging, but it's also makes the industry very unique is that, we're kind of all doing the same thing, but yet we've got very different motivations and skill sets behind it to figure out where you want to play. Do you want to be a distribution brewery? Do you want to be a tap room? Do you want to be somewhere in the middle? And as the industry has changed so rapidly over the last, 10 to 12 years, I think we've all had to adjust to that as well.
Now, you mentioned something interesting that I think, unless you understand, at least to a small degree, Iowa brewing and brewing in general, that most people probably would have missed, which was you linked the term craft brewing to a specific volume of beer. I think that might surprise most people. Can you expand on what it means to be a craft brewer?
Yeah, so the Brewers Association is our national organization, and there's always a lot of kind of, I don't know if you'd say controversy, but debate around, what does qualify as a craft brewer? And for many years, Sam Adams, Boston Beer Company, was the largest craft brewer, and still to this day, I believe is. And I think, and forgive me on my numbers because I've been looking at lots of numbers today, but they were kind of the very top of that ceiling, maybe at around 1 million barrels or something like that. And then, you go all the way down to people like us under 5,000 barrels, and that's where there's a huge bulk of them. But imagine the scale of somebody like us and somebody like Boston Beer Company, or somebody like us and New Belgium Brewing Company. And the access to market, the access to products and materials, the access to employees, those sorts of things. But yet we all are kind of defined in that we're craft, we're independent. You have to use traditional materials to a point. Obviously that's all kind of gone out the window. People are putting all kinds of things in beer, but primarily you have to use water, malt, hops, and grain, as opposed to using a lot of adjuncts like rice or corn that the big brewers do. So there is a very specific definition for the Brewers Association. What is a craft brewer? But then it gets kind of muddied because you look at marketing and those sorts of things, and you've got Budweiser coming in and saying, we've got our craft beer segment. And so the consumers get really confused. Another way that's been kind of pushed aside is the Brewers Association started going more toward independent, that you're an independent brewery, which is a term that we can kind of take on ourselves that hopefully provides a little more clarity to the consumer rather than just craft, which has now been taken over by the big guys.
Yeah, I mean, well, whenever there's a little confusion in a certain area, that's probably by design. Some of the bigger companies trying to cut into the craft brewing segment for whatever reason. I would guess it's a death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like, Peachtree probably is not a big threat to Budweiser, but a lot of craft brewers throughout the entire country far, that does start to
Yeah.
siphon away market share. So I can see the attraction of wanting to put themselves into the craft category. And I do remember reading something about Sam Adams. Like there's this huge debate, and you're being very kind, of course, but there's this huge debate where a lot of people consider they should not even be within that craft category. Obviously, you don't need to comment on that. But one of the questions I have is, it seems like when I was growing up in Iowa, because I grew up in Iowa, I think you did too, and there was this point where you didn't see breweries. That was not a thing. And then all of a sudden it was a thing. And then I would say, maybe my times are wrong, maybe 10 years ago, it was like a thing everywhere. What changed in this state?
Yeah, I think we've seen different waves of that. You saw a wave back in the early 80s when you had things like Sierra Nevada and Anchor Brewing out of California. There was kind of a big push in Colorado, and you saw some brew pubs come to life in those late 80s, early 90s. And I think, you saw things like Raccoon River, or you mentioned Scott Carlson earlier when we were talking, Court Avenue Brewing, those kind of came up during that period. And then there was a little contraction. People, went on to something else. And then I don't know what made this time catch fire. I think it's just that, consistent learning of an industry where then you get to the point where you have enough traction to kind of move forward. And I think this time, social media helps a lot. You can get your message out in a very inexpensive, cheap manner. It's very much word of mouth marketing, kind of influencer, Instagram, Facebook, those sorts of things that you didn't have earlier. And I think for a while we were very organized and very together about trying to build a cohesive kind of craft beer community. And people were very fraternal and took care of each other, and, kind of helped bump people up. It was us against them, the big guys.
Yeah.
And I think that just caught on. I think it resonated, the authenticity of it, good quality. People have traveled more and they're looking for new and different things, more European styles, et cetera. So I don't know. It was a lot of things all kind of coming together. There was a big push toward local.
That's true. That's a good point.
I think helped a lot.
Did the 2010 alcohol, the ABV law in Iowa change things?
And then I think that really did change. We actually started before that happened. Right. And frankly, this will tell you how dumb we were. We didn't even know that was an issue until our brewer, it kind of came up, and then we're like, awesome. Oh, we can't brew anything over 625. Which was fine, because also at that time, people,
your customers weren't complaining.
Yeah, it was like 3.2 or whatever. It's not.
Oh man.
Who needs a 10% beer?
Right.
But that changed, and yeah, I think that did allow for a lot more to come in. I think we've had some other changes in the industry, and just, people seeing that it's something that can create community. It can, help small towns. And then I think you've seen people come in who, have had some more money and have had maybe success in other industries, and then poured that into something that was a little more fun.
Yeah, I mean, you got a winning beer, right? The World Beer Cup. I think you won something out of that law change. Kind of. It was kind of the inspiration behind one of your winning beers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the law changed, and our brewer decided to do Blonde Fatale, which was an 8.5% Belgian style strong, which, I'll tell you, I was like, man, I don't know if that's going to sell. 8.5%. It's
funny, right?
It's a light drinker. Is that really what people are going to want? But I think it was so different. Nobody was doing anything like that in the market. Belgian beers were a little, kind of out there, but all of a sudden you had one that was homegrown and approachable. And then we won a gold medal, like you said, at World Beer Cup in 2014, and it really kind of launched it. I think, if nothing else, it gave a pedigree to it that then your distributors could go, oh, this is serious. These aren't just some small town punks playing around. Like, this has got some pedigree. So I think that really did help launch it. And you've seen a lot of other Iowa breweries come along and also increase that quality and take it very seriously. And I think that's helped elevate the whole field. So
there's some Star Wars poster somewhere at Tree Brewery that has the, like, at first I was a learner, now I'm the master, with like you holding a lightsaber probably. Sources say, unnamed sources tell me, Megan. So like, what is up with beer laws? Because as I've talked to some local brewers like yourself, this isn't this isn't a thing unique to you. Like, oh wait, were there laws on that? And I've spoken to some common friends, Scott Carlson, a couple of others, and I'll be honest, like, I have no idea how beer laws in this state work. So I know there are some certain laws that are a bit confusing. Can you go into kind of that stuff and what kind of nutty laws are applied to brewers?
yeah, I think, not to bore everyone to death, but it is, when you get kind of down into it, it's pretty fascinating, some of the rules and things that we have to work around to get our beer out to market. And some of it is for our protection. Some of it is just stuff that has been around since Prohibition, or has, as the brewers got more power, the wholesale distributors needed to make some rules to kind of stave off their power. And now all of a sudden you've got little people like us who are on the same side of the playing field as Budweiser and Miller Coors. And so then the laws that apply to Bud and Miller shouldn't maybe apply to small craft breweries, but yet we're treated the same. A really interesting example that got changed last year, that I think is easy to explain to people, kind of. When we explain it, they're always like, really? Why do you have to do that? But in Iowa, there's 2 different brewery licenses. You can be a native brewery or you can be a brew pub. A native brewery, you can self-distribute. So you can take your beer, you can take it to a grocery store and sell it to them, or you can sell it in your tap room to an individual at retail. If you become a brew pub, you can have multiple license locations. You can serve liquor. So if you want to be a full bar. And so we switched to the brew pub model. Well, that's all fine and good, except for that now you can't sell directly from your wholesale license to your retail license. So we had to send our beer from Knoxville, Iowa, put it on a truck, ship it to Ankeny, to our distributor, wait until their truck came back to our place, usually a week later, and then they would deliver our beer. We pay it for us. And we pay them for that privilege, plus I pay to ship it up there. So talk about adding cost and limiting options. It's an issue. Now, on the other hand, what they're concerned about is they don't want the big breweries being able to come in and sell beer direct to consumer or direct to a retailer without going through them, because they base their whole business model on delivering beer. So
who's they? Who's they though?
The distributors.
Okay, but like they don't have, if they're just a distributor, they don't have like that kind of control, do they?
Well, yeah, they do, because there's the contractual control around wholesale contracts, and there's a lot of protections that are put in place there through code, because, if you're a Budweiser distributor, let's say, and that's 90% of your business, and you built your whole business around it, and then Budweiser just decides to leave and go with a different distributor, your business is done.
Right.
So the wholesalers have a worry and a legitimate concern. It's just that now those same rules apply to us small breweries. And, if I left my distributor, I'm a tiny portion of their business. It's not going to be a big deal. Yet, if they decide to drop me, it's a completely different power differential. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does, just based on some of my previous contacts. But basically, these distributors, they can't, like, in a, I don't know the right words for this, but in a normal world, if you start to distribute directly your Tree beer, right? Because you want to save money, you want to make it more efficient, you want to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions, whatever, right? It's all of those things combined. The distributor can get mad at you, but they can't do anything unless there are certain laws protecting that model. Are there laws protecting them?
Yeah.
There it is.
Yep. Yeah. So those were all put in place because at a certain point, the brewers had more control and more power than the distributors. And now you've got a whole nother subsection of people like us who don't have as much power as the brewers, but it's just a weird layering. Law that got changed. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, this reminds me of remember when early on, and you've partnered with Templeton Rye in the past. We'll talk about that here if we have time. But I remember when Templeton Rye was doing their TR spotting on like Twitter. Like it was impossible to find a bottle of that. And then there was an article about, this is when I learned about this stuff. There was an article about people would follow the distribution truck to see where it was dropping it off. And I'm like, well, and then the thing, it said something about the state of Iowa's distribution truck. I'm like, wait, hold up. What does that even mean? And as I researched it, it's like the state of Iowa is essentially injecting itself into your supply chain or liquor supply chains. And now this is through that distributor, obviously, and then getting a cut on something that they're just injecting themselves into and not really, I mean, in my opinion, this is an opinion thing, but not really providing much value. Am I summing that up?
Well, a little bit. It is a little different for liquor than it is for beer. So beer doesn't have to go to the state warehouse, whereas liquor does. We just have to go to an independent distributor. It doesn't matter. We choose who that is.
Yeah. Okay.
But once we make that choice, we're locked in.
Sure.
It's really hard to get out of that.
Yeah.
Whereas liquor absolutely has to go through the state of Iowa, and then they control that.
Because you're in liquor too, right? You have some products. I think your Blonde Fatale is now a whiskey.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I am not in liquor because we cannot be a brewery and a distillery. Because that's another one of those laws. You can have a winery and a distillery and have common ownership, but you cannot be a brewer and own a distiller or vice versa. Which is really interesting because, you know, how you make whiskey is you make a mash, which is basically what we call wort.
Yeah.
And then you distill that down and age it. So we made a mash, a wort, for the foundry before we put any yeast or anything in it. So it's really just sugar water. We shipped that up to them, and then they have what they call their Brewer Distiller Alliance, and then they distill that down into the whiskey and then aged it. And so it's their product, but we have a marketing agreement where they can use our name, and but it's not our product. And so the same thing you were just talking about with Templeton, we wanted to have a bunch of that for our tap rooms. Well, once they send it to the state, they can't control where it goes.
That's crazy. So is this kind of why I go up to I'll go up to Total Wine, right? In Minnesota, for example, like a bottle of Woodford Reserve. I think maybe that's maybe something everyone's familiar with. It's like kind of like my go-to bourbon. I don't know, like here you can get it maybe $30, maybe $34 if you're really a bargain hunter. But up in Minnesota, it's like $25 or something. Like across the board, everything's cheaper. Is that one of the reasons why? Because they have different laws up there and we're like forcing the state to distribute things?
Yeah, I assume so. And again, I can't speak a ton on liquor because beer is complicated enough. But yeah, that is part of it. And then also just, you know, what products they'll bring in and what they won't bring in, et cetera. So it makes it a very different thing.
That's so funny. So I guess, I mean, there's everyone's legal liquor and beer education for the day.
Oh yeah. We could get really deep on that. The thing I was going to say was, so last year what happened was, you know, we had to literally ship our beer to Ankeny to our distributor, and then they would bring it back at their leisure and we would pay them for it. Because that was what we had to do. And so then last year that law got changed. So if it's an on-site tap room for your brew pub manufacturing license, now we can just move that from manufacturing into our taproom cooler, report it on our tax report, we pay the taxes. We don't have to move it anymore, which is infinitely helpful, not only from a cost perspective, but just, you know, we can produce something and have it done on Thursday and have it in the taproom on Friday instead of having to ship it and waiting until the next week for it to come back.
So we as Iowans all need to start to have beers with our legislature so that they change this crazy stuff. Yes. And you're right by the Capitol, your Des Moines location. So that should be fairly easy for all of us. Just everybody don't buy them their beer because then you're breaking other laws. So just be careful on that. So I want to ask about this. There's a lot we still have to cover. We're going to go 5 hours today. Just kidding. But there's this, like, I don't know how much of this is catching on, but occasionally on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook, we see these anti-alcohol movement. Is that a challenge for you? Is it even translating into sales at all, or is it an opportunity for Peachtree?
Yeah, I think it's a little combination of both. You know, the nice thing I think with craft beer typically is we tend to kind of try and model responsibility, and it's about, you know, getting together and consuming a nice beverage with friends or with family and doing it in a way that's responsible already. But I do think, and I was just talking to friends this weekend because we were out having some cocktails, and I said, what do you guys think about this dry January stuff, and how's that catching on? And they just looked at me like, are you nuts? What are you talking about? And I said, no, like, I'm hearing that in our trade magazines and in social media and everything more and more and more. We have not gone the route of doing a non-alcoholic beer. I think that's probably not where we're going to go in our small size. We can only do so many things. But this January, we did do a couple of really nice mocktails, and we bought a couple of non-alcoholic beers, and we have kombucha, we have a root beer, and we have tea. And we've been kind of promoting that because, there are people who want to take a break for a little bit, or maybe for a long time. And we want to be respectful of that. But at the same time, I think there's still a market for beer, and that's who we are and what we do.
Oh, 100%. That's not going to change ever. Now, were you making your own kombucha?
We don't.
Carrying it?
We carry it just in our Des Moines location. We carry it from Wild Culture over in Iowa City, which is also owned by a fellow Knoxville native.
That's crazy. So the pandemic obviously, and the response to the pandemic obviously changed things a little bit at Peachtree. Overall, do you think it hurt or helped? And did that kind of lead to your next announcement, which is phasing out bottles?
Yeah. I don't think the pandemic and the bottles really had anything to do with each other. We needed to invest in a canning line or figure out if we needed to invest in a bottling line or which way we were going to go. So we had contracted with Back Pocket for a couple of years to help us with cans while we figured that out, and just to see, which way the market was going to end up. So that ended up, in that we chose to invest in a canning line, and it just didn't make sense to continue with the bottles. The pandemic in general, I think, as much as we love it or hate it, it was great. We got a lot of help from the government as far as funding and those sorts of things. I think the harder part has been kind of the fallout the year or two after, with just people's approach to work, kind of what they want to do with their life, changing habits in people's buying patterns. Like,
you can't drink during the day anymore, Megan.
I know. and what's going to be next? Who knows? Like, the crystal ball is broken. And I've been saying that for a couple of years. My team is really tired of hearing me say that, but it's like, we were kind of getting to the point at year 10 that, we could kind of look backward and predict a little bit forward. And then all of a sudden that was just like, forget it. Like, everything got shaken up and you don't really know what's coming next. So I'm hoping we're getting back to some sort of steady state, some new normal, but yeah, it's different. Yeah,
that is crazy. So the bottles are going away. I was reading that actually one of the bigger reasons for the bottles going away is just that you guys were getting irritated with, and I didn't even understand how much of a challenge this is, but buying different glass from different manufacturers all over the world, and the glass wouldn't be compatible with this new machine you have, or some nonsense.
Yeah. So, I think we learned early on we wanted something unique and interesting. And when you're looking at commodity type items, as soon as you start going for unique and interesting, you're in trouble. So it was hard to source them. Costs was high, and just availability was always tough. And so we'd have to kind of shop around to different vendors. And our bottling line that we had, because again, back in 2010, 2009, there weren't a lot of equipment manufacturers that were focused on small brewers because there just weren't very many. And so you didn't have a lot of options to buy a bottling line. And so the one we bought served us really well, but it was really custom to whatever package you were putting it into. You couldn't just trade out bottle size or can size or whatever else.
Sure.
So every time we changed bottles, we had to really kind of Frankenstein that thing. And it was just time it was slowing down, and it was time to, like I said, invest in something more efficient. And if you go to the grocery store and look at the shelves, everything's in cans. It's safer for our staff. It's lighter, easier to maneuver.
That's true. It's
I think people can take them out doing their activities, and it's just, it's the right choice. But
Iconic has a cost. The iconic bottle definitely had a cost attached. Okay, so with our last 2 minutes, real quick, I get this question every time I do anybody with food or beverage, which is vegan, organic, gluten-free. Any options to be aware of in the future that you're launching?
No, not really. Again, it's kind of one of those things where we could do gluten-free. We've done seltzers, we've done some different things, but it's still made on the same equipment, so it's hard to really embrace that and own it. So again, with our small size, we try to just kind of stick to our niche.
Right. So like speaking, because I know a little bit, just to be dangerous with like organic, for example. So if you were to go into that, you'd have to probably create a completely separate manufacturing process.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be really careful about it. And just, if there are customers who are really sensitive to those things, we want to have a lot of integrity and be really transparent about it. And if you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't play in that space. And that's kind of the tack I've taken.
Right. So you do have a big announcement here. It's not even released and on store shelves yet, but you're releasing a brand new beer. Would you like to talk about that with the last 30 seconds?
Yeah, we are super excited. We have a new brewer. His name's Dave, and he is really excited to brew a Pilsner. So we've never done a Pilsner and put it in a can. So it'll be called 99 Pils, which is super fun. It kind of harkens back to the 99 counties of Iowa, and we'll be having some rollout events all over Iowa over the next few months to kind of celebrate our great heritage here in our state. But yeah, really nice, crisp, light beer, some laurel hops, keep it kind of floral, and we're really pumped. So that'll make its debut at Burfest over in Coralville on the 28th. That's very cool. Megan, you've dropped a lot of incredible information, obviously, like the beer, the barrel and bottle breakdown and all this crazy information, which is a lot of stuff you shared in a tight amount of time. So thank you so much for that. Where is the website? How do people buy your stuff? How do people learn more about Peachtree? Yeah, everybody's welcome. Peachtreebrewing.com is our website. It's updated this last year, so it's got all of our beers and events. And then we'd love to have you join us in our tap rooms in Knoxville or Des Moines. And of course, we're at fine retailers all over Iowa and Nebraska. So all that detail is going to go on iowapodcast.com. Of course, if you're driving, don't worry. We'll capture all of that, put that in an easy to find place. Megan McKay, the founder and CEO of Peachtree Brewery. Thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for forgiving my lack of exact numbers. No, it's fine. Well, that's what the website's for. Perfect. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.